in our research and in our anecdotal work, we found that there are 4 relationship rhythms that are pretty consistent over all types of relationship, whether it's time, money, energy, health,
love,
well-being, love, age, and that's respect, responsibility, reframing, and resilience.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Shafer, your host of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, musician, life coach, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. Now, today we have wonderful guests here together. We're excited to have the relationship experts and couplepreneurs on the show, Ken Ashby and Maris Segal. Ken Ashby and Maris Segal are business partners, husband and wife, and couplepreneurs. They are TEDx speakers featured in 21 best-selling collaborative books and their own bestseller, The R Factor. We're so happy to have them on the show to share their inspiring stories and their insights on how to improve how we relate to others. Thank you so much for being here, Ken and Maris.
What a great intro. Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
for having us.
I think we should just stop now.
Well, we got the background. Well, I should say just part of the background, because you two, there's no way I could encapsulate all the amazing things that you have done in the show. And I really want listeners to stick around to hear everything, because you have so many amazing stories. Tell me about how you got started on this journey together to become couplepreneurs and relationship experts.
I'll jump in here since my story is probably the truest.
We'll say perspective is everything, right? This is what we know.
I would first say that we listen to intros when we are guesting or speaking or whatever, and you also I think for me it's something that just came forward for me when all the things that we've done. I really see it in a different way. I see it as all the opportunities we had to work with or be with or participate in some project. And we were honored by all of those opportunities that we have. Most of them we came through in good color with. Some of them, you always don't make it in everything, but we certainly strive and just grateful for the opportunities. So the question was a good one. How do we get started? I would say that Maris and I have been in the people business all our lives, really from the time we started, from my early upbringing and from Maris's upbringing, and she'll tell you more about where she started in the Olympics, torch relay, and for me it was music. But we've always been in that people-centered work. So when we began to date and meet each other, which is a whole nother story, because we had a date that I thought was a date, and found out later that Maris just thought it was 2 friends going out for dinner. So that's just a different perspective there. But later on, a year and a half later, not seeing each other over that time period, just communicating on email and phone calls, we finally had our real first date. But from that moment on, and I think we realized that there's something here, there's a connection, there's a relationship, there's a integral part of us that steps forward and demands something more. So Maris had a client with Harvard. She was producing an event, and she said, "Do you want to co-produce this event with me? Do you want to come in on it?" I said, "Sure, let's try to work together." We hadn't, and we made the agreement going in that if working together doesn't work, that doesn't mean we as a couple doesn't work. But in fact, working together did work, and it's been that way. We've been working together 24/7 for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Well, actually, so that's a good perspective on the beginning. And it actually, so Ken and I knew each other many years before. And we kind of just navigated a friendship, essentially. And we were both involved in a global youth leadership organization that uses music and social impact. And Ken was one of the original singer-songwriters. So we met during that time. Fast forward years later, this is the scenario. And here's what's interesting. We are in relationship 24/7, right? From the time we wake up in the morning to the time our heads hit the pillow, we were in relationship 24/7 because we're also always in relationship with ourselves. And every relationship begins with a connection. So here's what's interesting. When Ken and I first met, and I was getting to know his sister more than him at that time, we just met, he was the guy whose music we were actually bringing to the world, because we were bringing this music to the world with an organization called Up With People. And in that work together, we just started to get to know each other, but we really weren't friends. Many years later is when we reconnected, when I helped launch the Alumni Association. Ken was still doing his singer-songwriting work. And with them, his work was really all over the world at that point. And we sat down and we had this dinner. And what was interesting was that it was just this sort of warm, comfortable, connected. It was so easy. And in an organization like that, if you're an alumni of something, a school, right, you just connect. There was no expectation on my part of what it was or what it wasn't. Ken clearly had a perspective on it, which tells me that if you're not communicating clearly, what does that mean? So, right? So that was really, when you look at our early start, what we've always known is that there's this beautiful connection between us. And we never analyzed it. We've never analyzed it. We've been together now 20 years, living, loving, working, and playing together. And so we did kind of set out on a little bit of an expedition over many years, over decades, kind of working with our celebrity clients, our grassroots clients, our corporate clients. And we kind of figured out that the flow and rhythm that works for us actually is a flow and rhythm that works in every relationship. Like every relationship has a beat and a tempo, right? That we can change, or that changes at any point during the day. For instance, I woke up in the morning in a really good space, feeling great. We did our gratitude. We did our meditation. Now, in an hour, something could happen to shift that rhythm. And what Ken and I have always known is that what works with us is this beautiful energy of communication and all of that. And now we see that it actually works in every relationship you have, every relationship a corporation has, an athlete. And it's not just about the relationship with themselves, it's our relationship with each other and our relationship with things like time and money. And all of these other pieces are about relationships. And you said something in the opening that I thought that I wanted to add to, which is how we relate to each other is everything. Because that's what people remember, is how they feel in our connections. As we build our connections, that's what builds these long-term or short-term relationships in our business or our personal life. It doesn't matter what part of the life it's in. But what you said earlier is really important, and that is the relate word. And we say that what we create is really based on how we relate. Right? So
I love
that.
that.
So that's the answer to the first question. So I think once we get through the 40 other questions, we're going to need to bring our lunch. So.
Well, I love that. And it really takes me to, I really enjoyed watching a TED Talk that you both gave as a team on relationships to kind of get back to this and to parse it out as you were taking, a step back and looking at, okay, our relationship, this works really well. Why does it work really well? It's how we relate to one another. And how does that translate to the rest of our lives? How can I take this really healthy relationship and potentially replicate it, not just for myself, but also for people that I'm working with, and spread this information so that everyone can start relating in a more connecting rather than disconnecting way, or at least take stock of what's happening in our relationships so we can make well-informed decisions about how we want to structure our lives, how we want to pursue certain relationships, what weight they need to have in our lives, what that looks like. I highly recommend everyone, of course, listen to that TED Talk if you haven't already. In it, you brought up some really important language. And I think, just like you said, really latching onto the word relate is what we create, is how we relate. In that TED Talk, you brought out some really important language about relationships that brought it into perspective for me. And you were saying that, am I living in relationship to my life or to others, or with my life and others? Could you explain that for our audience and really take that point home? Because I think it is such a great mind shift to really consider how we're showing up to our life in that way.
I love that.
Yeah, this idea of being in relationship to or being in relationship with really translates to all connections that we have. I mean, if you're having a conversation to somebody, it's kind of one-sided. Maybe you're putting everything that you want in that conversation, in that connection. Really is different than having a relationship or conversation with someone.
Which is that exchange.
So with someone is that exchange. I have my Maris does all the
I'm doing
dancing,
the hand gestures because Ken's arm is around me.
So this idea of to and with, and we think that words are so important in everything. We can't take words back. When words emanate from our voice, that's it. They're words. I often tell people as a singer-songwriter that what music are you putting into the world with your words? Think about it. When our voices have timbre and vibration and like a melody, and our words have poetic or impact from what we say. And so everything we say and what we do and how we express ourselves is really music. So if other people hear the music, then they can communicate, then we can relate together. I would say that one of the other things that in our research and our anecdotal work, that we found that there are 4 relationship rhythms that are pretty consistent over all types of relationship, whether it's time, money, energy, health,
love,
well-being, love, age, and that's
business,
respect, responsibility, reframing, and resilience. And just highlighting each one of those, can you imagine any successful relationship you've ever been in that there was no respect? Respect is absolutely crucial. We get to be in respect. Responsibility. Every relationship, no matter what, it has 2 sides, and you are responsible along with the other person or the other thing that you're relating to. Reframing, we talk about reframing, and reframing is not about rewriting the future, the past. Reframing is about looking at it from a different perspective. What if I changed my perspective? What if I said, well, what if the opposite is true? What does that come up with?
Or what can I learn
And what
from
can I
this
learn
moment,
from that
right?
perspective? And then resilience, obviously, every relationship we have, we get to stand up resilience, because if you just give up at the first moment in a relationship, then you're not really committed to it.
And being grateful, being able to come through it.
So
gratitude plays a big role in all that. And if I could just add something to the to and with, no matter what, I mean, we all have relationships in our lives, and statistics show that we can actually hold about 150 kind of solid relationships in our mind, which is interesting, right? So when you think about that. So now the question is, how are you showing up in those relationships? And the first and most significant relationship first is, how are you showing up as yourself inside? Are you respecting yourself, right? Are you standing in accountability with yourself? Are you being true to yourself? The whole notion first of being in relationship with myself. We actually do a relational leadership assessment because our work is really centered around relational leadership. Personal life, professional life, same thing. It's a weaving of all of these skills and creating a culture of connection and safety and trust. And if you're doing that, and if the priorities, like when you look at now the priorities on soft skills and hard skills, what we are focused on are the soft skills. We are focused on the people powering people, all the ways we relate in a human interaction. And the soft skills are finally getting their due. So the statistics now, there's a Harvard statistic out that says 85% of job success ultimately is the result of soft skills. It's the priority on the soft skills, right? Interesting. At the end, the hard skills, which are the technical knowledge, equally important to all of that. However, the priority now is shifting because our business doesn't start with the mind and the technology. It starts with the need, right? And solving for. So that means it's a humanity start, which means our people are powering our profits and our philanthropy. So all of these relationship rhythms are really what we found. We really identified them over the course of this research that we did and said, wow, it's true. That's every single solitary marriage, business, athlete. I mean, it was remarkable. And when you adopt that type of culture and you're in it every day, let's say you choose it at home, it will show up for you at work, I guarantee you. And if you choose that culture at work to create that with your teams, to really build that, that will show up for them at home. So then they become stronger, more confident individuals, and then greater team members, which then impacts your retention and your profitability. All connects, right?
I want to dive into this concept twofold. So, one thing that I noticed to kind of bring to light or give a personal example about taking responsibility for how you're showing up in the world and how that's coming back at you. Because again, as you said, the life we create is related to how we relate, right? What creates our life. And something people often talk about is social media. And people will say it's toxic and it's so negative and the messages aren't good. The interesting thing is, though, if you are coming at this tool, because that's what it is, it's a relational tool. It's also related to business and marketing, but all of those things are also keyed into interpersonal relationships. It's all interconnected. And you can kind of hack this tool or use it to better your self-development and your life experience by showing up to it in a different way. What do I mean by that? By engaging with positive reels, by engaging with movements of philanthropy and support, and not watching the reels and then telling the algorithm, I want the negative things. I want this, I want that. No, only engaging in the things that truly resonate with your values and beliefs. And I think that's something that is a life skill that we learn as we're learning to relate with others, how we want to spend our energy and time and how we want to relate and engage. We don't have to relate. We don't have to mirror what's coming at us. And we sometimes have to fight that, neurological, psychological urge and reflex to mirror what's coming at us. And instead say, no, I'm going to stay true to how I want to relate to this person, no matter what they're bringing to me.
Yeah.
Boy, you've covered so many, and I love hearing you explain this because you have that background as a physician and a neurologist of really understanding this, which I technically don't understand. But
You know what's coming up for me though, and so if you don't mind, I just one of the things that's coming up for me as you're saying it, and I think you maybe we're going to go there, but
probably
is choice.
Choice, yes.
Right?
Choice.
Is that we have an opportunity all day long, from the time we wake up in the morning, to choose. The choices we make all day, now, determine our future, period. Right? So it's a choice about what we're putting into our bodies. It's a choice about what we're putting out of our bodies. The skill building is the discipline of what to put in our bodies and what to also share. It's a discipline, right? It's a discipline. It's also a space of really learning this self-trust and this self-respect. If I truly respect myself first and I come from that place and I'm relating to myself first with kind words, with supporting words, then how I choose to spend the rest of my day on negative Nelly sites or other things is because I'm showing up in a space and that's how I'm feeling. We are a mirror to what we're experiencing, right? And to the people we're connecting to. So I think that the first place for me as I look at all that is sitting from a space of loving yourself from the inside out so that we can then be and choose from a space of strength and not a space of lack and lack. And I think the other word I'm looking for is desperation. Because sometimes we're so in that seeking. Oh, if I just could find, yeah. And then typically what happens when you find it? Have you taken action? Probably not. You're still, okay, I got it, net. And so that's why we think it's really so important to ground in these ways. That is part, and it's not always easy. It's part of learning. It's part of really learning and being okay. Look, I'm just going to be really frank. I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm a still in recovery lone wolfer, right? So seeking support. So when we look at these and accepting support versus chasing the finish line, because when we chase it, we keep acting like we have something running after us versus being okay with just where we are in the moment. So I've been, over the years navigating the recovery of all that as we've worked with corporations and professional athletes and families. It is all the same. And what we really came to was social is social. It's neutral. It's all neutral. How we choose to engage with it and the choices we make in all of that is actually what determines the outcomes in the end, whether or not it's during the day or down the road and how we're feeling. It directly affects how we're feeling because, again, how we're relating to social is directly impacts what we're creating. It's all that feedback. So I know I stepped on you a little bit, but the choice was coming up for me a lot.
No, I think all that's, I'm with you, and you took words out of my mouth for sure. Two of the things that came up, Dr. Shafer, when you mentioned it was one, reflection, and two, responsibility. And I just would address both of those and would love to get your perspective on this, is that we are not looking for something that reflects us. We are actually what we're projecting is being reflected back to us. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the second thing I would, again, love to get your thoughts on was you brought up responsibility, taking responsibility. It just reminded me that wisdom teachers have told us that there's actually 4 levels to responsibility. And maybe you're fully aware of this, but one of them is certainly, I'm not responsible. I didn't do it. Somebody else did it. It's their fault. We all know people in our lives who are maybe adopt that level of responsibility. That's kind of the first, which is no responsibility. Secondly is I take responsibility, which is, okay, it's not really my fault, but I'll take it. I'll take one for the team. I'll take the responsibility.
Which can also be manipulative, right? Yeah. And authoritarian.
The third level of responsibility is bottom line. I'm responsible. I am responsible. Whatever happens, I am responsible. I am responsible for what I say. I am responsible for how I treat people. I am responsible for how I care for people that I love. And that fourth level of responsibility is, and this is a hard one, I'm responsible for everything. Nothing happens that I'm not responsible for. Can I control everything? No, of course not. But I am responsible for everything because my interaction, my relationship, my relating to. Anyway, those came up, but I'd love to get your thinking on that.
Yeah, I love you bringing this up and the thoughts that I have when you're discussing it as you're going through those layers. At first there's kind of and I don't love using the term narcissistic, but there's this coercive, controlling, and by the way, nothing's my fault. Even though I have control over everything, person at the beginning, or a small child, right, who can't take responsibility. That's what I see the first level. The second level, I see the people pleaser. I see the person that has not really taken responsibility for themselves. They don't feel empowered to have control over how they are showing up because of things that happened to them in early childhood that set pathways alight in their brain that haven't been corrected. They haven't been reframed yet. And then as you're going through 3 and 4, you're getting more on that mindfulness, self-development path of really taking responsibility. And I will say, from my perspective, as someone with a great deal of education and interest in psychology, and as a neurologist, the peace and focus and energy you have left over when you get to that fourth level makes, in my assessment, all of the hard work it takes to get there, because it's not easy and it's not necessarily that intuitive based on our cultural norms and our limiting beliefs. Once you get there, the amount of energy you have that you're no longer burning on blaming others or even blaming or shaming yourself, but just being focused on, hey, I'm responsible. This is my one life. What do I want to do? This is where we are right now. Okay, where do we want to go with this?
Who do I get to be, right?
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's interesting look, the notion now of elevating interpersonal skills finally getting its due. So we're all very excited about that. And I think the pandemic pause was a great gift for most in that way. I mean, obviously, the horrors of people who passed away and that heart that tugged at everybody also really, really brought forward the philosophy that we guide our business with, which is we are all connected as humans first. And the bottom line begins with relationships. So whether or not you're in your work environment, it does not matter. From the time someone actually is in an interview process, takes a job, is now at the front desk answering the phone, is now being onboarded, is now all the way through to the end person they've impacted in business, it's all there, right? So when we think about it from that perspective, we actually have the ability to be in our own space of choosing and to be in response or reaction to our life, right? And so that's also part of it, is when we can be in that space and look at these 4 relationship rhythms from a standpoint of, okay, this is how I'm relating, and how is that showing up in my relationship with my kids and my relationship with my spouse who I work with, which is even harder because there's the separation of, I love you, my husband, but I'm a little frustrated with you as my business partner today. But I still love you as my husband. And, so all of that. And I think the notion of being this whole response versus reaction is also a choice. And that really serves to build or tear down trust. And it also serves to either allow us the authority over a moment, which is neutral because it's the meaning we put on it, or the authority overbearing on us and us becoming the victim, right?
One of the areas we get into with our relationships is, I think maybe we talked a little bit about it, is this idea of reacting versus responding. And we have something that we sort of term the RSVP pause. So when you get an RSVP in the mail, you get an invitation to some big gala or dinner or whatever, it says RSVP, which means respondez s'il vous plaît, or respond please. So sometimes, and we do, we think about it, we take a breath and say, well, let me think, can I go to that? Is it timing work? So we're responding to that, as opposed to saying, no, I would never go to that. That's a reaction. And the reactions we have come from our past, as you mentioned before, from our limiting beliefs and all of those things. So this RSVP pause is whenever you think you're being triggered by something that makes you react or see yourself in that way, is just take a pause. Give yourself a chance to actually respond. And that's a big thing in relationships. And again, opening our mouths and saying words that that you can't take back. So I was wondering what you felt about neuroplasticity, because you've been in this field. That can we, or I would say we can, retrain our brain to see things, to accept things, to not operate in the past or anxious about the future. From your research and your study, what comes forward?
Yeah, we absolutely can. There's neuroplasticity in all of us, but we have to be really intentional about it. And that's why I love the framework that you've set out and that people can read about, in your book and by listening to your talks and discussions like one we're having today, because I think it's a really nice way to distill the process. And I do similar things with my clients too. When you respect yourself, it starts with that, right? Okay, I'm going to take the time to go through this process. So I'm going to respect myself and I'm going to respect you, the person I'm relating to, that maybe something's gone awry and my trigger detector has gone off. I'm being triggered. And instead of backing off from that and saying, oh, they made me feel bad, they're bad, I'm going to go away and we're not going to have a good relationship moving forward, and instead saying, I respect this relationship or I respect myself, I'm going to lean into why did that trigger me? So taking responsibility, going through your framework here, and then really digging into the why. And so if you keep asking yourself really good, concise questions about, okay, but why? But why did I feel that way? And you give yourself, usually the first 2 or 3 answers are going to be really superficial and really maybe even blame or shame related. And you say, okay, why did that happen? And you keep distilling it down. Then you can get to the real why behind your reaction. And it often brings it back to the self. And we learn things about ourselves in this process. And then we can do the work of reframing it and say, okay, when this person brings this to the table, do I have to respond this way? Do I have to react this way rather? Or can I respond in a way that helps get us back on the track where I want us to be, because it's moving me toward my goal, or it's moving us toward our shared goal. And I'm going to respect this other person that, maybe they unintentionally got us off track even. I'm going to help us get there. I'm going to give us this chance, and I'm going to be resilient in those moments and stay true to who I am. So I love using your framework to really demonstrate how, if you make this a practice, it's got to be a new habit. And by doing it every day, it's going to help you get out of the old habits of being reactive and of falling back into shame or blame, which, like you said, is that lower level of relating. But getting you to a higher level, you have to build that habit. And that brings me to a question I had for the both of you is, when we are teaching people this new framework and we're trying to help them relate in a different way, I'm of the school of thought that this isn't a slow process. I can give you the seeds. I can make you start thinking, and maybe you're going to relate differently to one person in your life because that relationship is really a pain point for you. It's really causing you distress. And so you're going to try that new thing. Maybe today, maybe in a month, or even a year from now. And once you really start committing to being responsible for yourself and for respecting yourself and how you're showing up in relationships, that takes a long time. How do you find that timeline to be for people, to give them a realistic idea of what this process really looks like when you're developing a better ability to relate to others?
Well, I would just add very quickly here in the beginning that it's no one and done. There is not one and done. You don't do it and say, okay, all right, now I made that change. Box checked. No, it's continual because we have human characteristics.
And it's intentional, right? So one of the things that is most important is to really look at this framework and look. And we can, each of these relational rhythms have within them very specific ways of being and actions that are really important, right, for moving forward. And when you look at even just one, and so I'll just give you an example. So in the rhythm of respect, we show up, we're present, right? We listen, which builds trust, and we lead with compassion and authenticity. So what you heard there was listening, right? We're building trust, we're present. So even if literally you just said, okay, for the next week, I'm going to look at 2 relationships in my life, one with myself, maybe one with someone else, personally or professionally. I'm going to look at them and live them through the lens of the relational rhythms. And I'm going to quickly go through these others. In the rhythm of responsibility, right, we are intentional, right? When we know our intention and we hold to that intention and we stay true to that, everything else falls into place. It's when we get off course on that intention And that really gets difficult. And we're committed. So then we're committed to that intention. And here's another one that's very important in responsibility, which is we communicate clearly. So I don't know if you know the 4 agreements, but Don Miguel Ruiz, right? We are impeccable with our word. Because when we don't communicate clearly, we have issues with expectations. And when something breaks down in a business deal, in a personal relationship, in any part of your life, it's likely that the communication hasn't been clear. And so trust is broken because the expectations are not in agreement. And we can talk further about that in just a sec. So then when you look at reframing, you say, okay, well, in reframing, we lead with gratitude. What is that moment that says, okay, I get to just be in this moment. What am I gaining from this, right? We accept our traumas of our past and don't allow them the authority over us to really limit us, because we know that that doesn't support us. And in the rhythm of reframing, we meet people where they are. So in those moments of craziness, it's also that instead of judgment, coming at something in the relationship from a place of curiosity and discovery. So that when we're exploring this, I felt this way by this person, and now I get to kind of dive deep and go, what the heck just happened? Judgment's not supportive. Judgment is not helpful. But when we're curious and coming at it from that place to say, wow, I wonder where my mate was coming from in that space. I reacted. They came at me in that way. I wonder what was happening there. What was happening for them before they came in? What might have triggered that moment, and what was my role in it? So we always say, in any moment, in any situation, we get to look at it from a few perspectives. You want to ask 4 questions?
Sure, yeah. So we have something we call the curiosity questions. In any situation, if you're working with a team or if you're working with another person or even with yourself, you first ask what's working. What's working in this relationship, and celebrate it. Man, I'm so happy that this is all going right. So first, start with celebrating what's working first. Secondly is say what's not working. And the key to what's not working is not to be in judgment, but to be curious. Okay, well, this isn't working. Okay, it's not working. This isn't working. Okay, it's not working. It's not a judgment that it's not working. Then you move to the third curiosity question is what's missing? How can we bring these 2 things together? What's missing? And then, of course, the fourth curiosity question is what action can I take? What can I do now to close this gap between what's working and what's not working?
And how can we support each other in it?
And how can we support each other?
So
I wanted to say one other thing that you mentioned before about this idea of what we're proposing and what, and we're not, many people have said this before. We do it in our own way, and we say, great, say it in every way, any way you want to, with the more the merrier who talk about this sort of relationships. But how quickly, and we said it's not one and done, it's a continual process through your life. It's a continual process because it's transformation. It's not just change. We have change every day. Some of the change is not transformational. Some of the change is just different. This is transformational work. This is working to re-evaluate and to witness yourself and to take that transformational work. And as we all know, transformational work, I mean, at billions of years on the planet, things transform to something else or evolve to something else. And that's why we feel this idea of relationships and the importance of relationships is really maybe the next evolution of our human story, of the story that we get to bring forward. How maybe we were all sent here to realize that we are all connected. When during COVID, looking around the world, it was impossible to say that we are not all connected. We were connected everywhere in the world. So we're in a learning process, and now's the time.
That's really beautiful. And I want to bring it back to your body, because I find that to really serve people in moments when they're trying to take philosophies and concepts and really make sense of them about the time it takes to start this development. And just think about walking. You didn't learn to walk immediately. You maybe started walking when you were, if you were an early walker, 9-10 months, which, good luck parents. That's really tough when they start walking that early. Or maybe you were a late walker and it was more closer to 15 months, but you were still a toddler for a really, really long time. And throughout their lifetime, an individual is going to face challenges that make them have to go back to the basics on how they walk. They may have a stroke or an injury. They may be on a new medication. They may have changes to their hearing that affects their balance, or to their vision. There are all sorts of things that can affect us. Neuropathy, so we feel our feet differently, and that affects our balance. As we go through life is going to give us challenges. It's going to have disruptions that we have to learn to be resilient to through developing these processes. We're often inspired to do them when we're in a time of disruption or disarray in our lives, or discomfort. That's what that pain really tells our nervous system. Okay, I need to invest in myself. I need to change something, because this isn't tenable. I can't keep going on with the mindset I have, with the choices I'm making. I need to shift my habits and my routines and my relationships. But then we have to say, I'm going to be responsible to myself and going to continue this journey once everything's okay and settled out, so that it really becomes a fabric of my being and an ongoing practice. Like you said, it's a lifelong journey.
It's also not easy. It's sometimes not easy when you think about, as you mentioned, the walking, where you're learning to walk. People who've had those tragic moments, whatever it is, have to start over and relearn to walk. Well, this idea of looking at your relationships and relearning how to walk in a relationship is crucial, and it's not easy. It's we fall down, as we know. You fall down, you don't do it, you don't have everything you need. Maybe you need more energy, more time, but it's not easy, and it's worth it.
And it's also about giving ourselves grace. I mean, look, respect, responsibility, reframing, and resilience. There isn't anyone on this planet who doesn't know those words. The question is, what are the simple ways that I actually can embody those words in my life to really absorb it, to have this become my culture? And so now think about that from a family perspective. And look, how Ken and I identified these 4 relationship rhythms was literally working with our clients. I mean, hundreds of people. There isn't one person that didn't look at these 4 and say, yeah, that's pretty much it. And so when we think about that, that means 2 things. That means, 1, no one is starting from the ground up. No one is, because you already know these words, right? So it's not that it's a new language. It's a new embodiment. It's a new muscle. It's just that. It's, what does presence really mean? So we laughingly coach in our work as we're working with individuals and teams. And one of the things we say is, especially people who are really ambitious, they're on a mission to get there. They just want to get there. I just want to go there. I want to be there. I want to be that person. I want to be that person. I want to be, okay, got it. THER. Could we make a little suggestion? If you take the T off and you stand in excellence right where you are, then you got to start here first. Once you're here in a space and you're navigating that from a place of trust and partnership and communication, and you're living in that excellent space, then we work to get there. Now, we always have a vision, right? We always have a vision and intention of what we want there to be. Absolutely. That's important, because that's the goal. That's the intention. That's our next benchmark. What we don't do very often as humans is we jump over the small wins, right? And that's really silly, stupid. Because why? Because every small win, doctor, feeds the brain, feeds the body, feeds the mind, gives us that boost, And I'm just going to be really honest. Ken and I have had probably the toughest year family-wise with a number of things going on in our family over the last 12 months to 2 years. So coach thyself, right? So you can imagine what this has been. And what thankfully we've had the relationship rhythms that literally we live by every day. That being said, the moments that I'm in reaction, because where does it come from? It's never that moment. For me, those moments of reaction and the, oh my gosh, I can't fix this. Oh my gosh, it's fear. It's fear. When fear rises up and becomes our authority, we are only in relationship to things. We have nowhere to go. We cannot move. We are frozen. But when we face the fear, so I'm going to give you an acronym here. When we face the fear, freely acknowledge current emotion, because that fear doesn't get to be pushed down. That anger doesn't get to be pushed down. We come into the space of, oh, just put on your big girl pants, which I spent my life doing, and it did not serve me in the long run, because people then didn't see me as vulnerable, and they saw me as a know-it-all, and I thought, oh my gosh, just because I was afraid to be seen. I was afraid to be seen in that way. That would show weakness. And what we know is that we get to acknowledge, no matter what we're feeling, we get to freely acknowledge that current emotion and give it a space to then say, I see you, you don't serve me right now, and to ask it to step away. And these are literally skills and tools that you can call on all day long. So I think that's part of the navigation of this, is not looking at this and saying, oh, I can't adopt that into my life. You already know these words. You already know these feelings, right? So now it's looking at them from a more detailed perspective and saying, okay, how do I actually apply that differently and embody that in my personal life and in my business life? Same step.
It's such an important point that you're making. And I think, especially when we are experts in our field, and I think also, as women that have become experts in fields that were traditionally male dominated, and we may feel we have to show up to prove ourselves, to show up even better and stronger, and seem just impenetrable to all of the challenges that we are almost having to be superhuman. But the reality is, for example, as a physician, if I come into a hospital room, someone that's just had a big neurological injury, whether it's a stroke or a fall, some other trauma, and I come in with the air of the expert, and I've got all the data and I've got the plan, but I don't relate to them on a human level, on a vulnerable level, and say, this is really scary. I don't have the answers for you. I don't know. And not to say, there's something people often say that I don't find very connecting. It's very common, I don't have a crystal ball. I find that a very disconnecting way to have this conversation. Instead, just saying, I don't have the answers for you. This is really scary. Here's what we do know. So we've got something to hold on to. We've got some ground under us, but we're going to be here together. And you are going to commit to yourself and be responsible to yourself on your recovery. You're here in the hospital. You're committed to doing what you can with therapies. You're committed to making choices that are in alignment with you. You have autonomy, right? Like, you're not just going to do what I say because I'm your doctor. You're going to make the choices that are respectful to you as a person and your goals, and just work with that person, but show up, like you said, in a vulnerable sense. And I think that when we hide behind this shield of expertise and we don't come as a human who may also be frightened, who's living this day for the first time, just like everybody else, who feels vulnerable and uncertain about the future, but they're going to do everything they can to show up the best they can for their fellow man, that's where connection really lies. And that's where, when we have that trust built with our patients, with our physicians, with our families, our business partners, whatever that relationship is, that vulnerable connection is what truly helps us relate on a human level and a really true level together.
And I think also and it's beautiful the way you said that, and it's really true. And the bottom line is that's where these choices come in, right? And not allowing the past to really shield how we're showing up, because then look, that's part of the inner work. That's part of the work that everybody's getting to do right now, and it's beautiful. I think the other piece to this, and I want to go back to intention for a second. In your work, which is very tough, right? You hold the space for someone, but from a space that is not overly emotional. You hold the space for someone that is informational. And so, we talk about relational intelligence, not just emotional intelligence, right? So you're, as a doctor, and which is very tough. I mean, I've had some really challenging experiences when my mom was sick and she was in the hospital. She'd been diagnosed with lung cancer, and she was in the hospital at this point about 4 weeks later, maybe about 6 weeks later, and she's having a hard time breathing, and we're thinking, okay, a few more months. We've agreed already that we're living the experience at home. She had been working full time. She was a clinical social worker and NLP trainer, and just remarkable, incredible, heart-centered human being and servant leadership. And the nurse walks in. The doctor literally had just left the room and said to my mom, look, probably we're going to have a difficult time continuing to be able to pull the fluid off the lungs at this point. That's really where we are. He wasn't giving us any more information. Now, of course, we are her, advocates, and I'm pushing and asking these questions, and he's not answering us. What do we think this experience is going to be? It sounds like you're shortening the time. What are you saying? What are you thinking? Well, Deb, and we were never a huge fan of his approach in general. He'd been my mom's doctor a long time, and not, in some ways, could have been a little bit more assertive lovingly with her, because she could have taken some other steps. And I understood his approach. So we also loved him. So it was that struggle in that moment. He leaves the room, and in comes this woman with all this bubbly energy and a chart. Okay, so Miss Segal barrels by us. There are 4 of us family members standing there. Barrels by us, walks in. Okay, so Miss Segal, let's talk about your palliative care. And I just looked at her. I said, palliative care? I didn't even know what that was at that moment. And she said, well, yes, we want to be sure that your mom's comfortable. I said, stop right there. Please leave the room. Well, I'm in here, and I said, I'm going to ask one more time nicely. And my mom was laying in the bed just going, what did that woman just say to me? So at no point was there a conversation that she was shifting into a comfortable state. That is not what the doctor said. So that person, so interesting, right? So now let's go back to the experience of respect, responsibility, reframing, and resilience, right? So when we don't, this is really important in business and in our personal lives. When we don't connect first with where somebody is and we just come at them, that is not being in relationship with them, right? So what could have shifted in her approach? She could have potentially said to us as a family, I see you're here as a family. Would it be okay if I come in? Here's who I am. Or she could have called one of us out and said, hey, I'm going to step in here. Let me explain to you what we're doing? Or she could have even walked in saying, hi, I'm so-and-so. Here's what I'm doing here is now. I mean, there were so many other ways that could have occurred, right? So in that moment, that was a very startling experience, and obviously still a memory for me, but it was such a beautiful memory in being able to shift it. And my mom, as this woman walked out, my mother said, I'm so grateful that I have protectors, and please don't ever have that woman come back again. Interesting, right? And so we learn from that. And what I learned from that moment is, how am I showing up? How am I showing up? How we feel inside is how we're showing up. So what I figured out later was she was 2 hours behind. Oh, yeah, that's how she ran into the room. She was 2 hours behind. She had just come back from vacation and was overwhelmed with her work. I understand and appreciate all of that. That gets to stay outside of the hospital room. So it was interesting, just a perspective on that, because I got curious about what's the scoop here. I'm sure that that's really not how this person is normally. What was the deal? So anyway, that was, interesting kind of just POV on that. But
no, I really appreciate you sharing that very intimate story from your life, and also how you, through really understanding relationships and people just on a human level. And, in that moment, she needed to leave and you didn't want her to be a part of the care team because that just wasn't the direction that you were ready to go in, nor the tone. But you also gave her grace and you were invested in respecting her as an individual and figuring it out, seeing what frame she had, what perspective she had on it, so that then you could just move forward from it without being necessarily upset with her about it, because you could just say, this is what it is. In this moment, this is the choice she made, and this is why, this is how she was showing up. And I'm going to learn from that. And I can use this as an example to bring people's attention to how they're showing up, because many of us are just not aware of how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, it is very true. And we experience this all the time with, we've laid out we've done the work, we are committed to this idea. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to go back and look at this video numerous times because you have distilled a lot of our work here very beautifully, and we want to hear that. But we are experiencing this all the time, and I don't know if we have a time to tell a recent story that we had.
Do we have a few more minutes? Are we okay on time?
Oh yeah, let's share it. We want to share every story we can with our storytelling audience.
So just as an example of how we are constantly in this mode of approaching these relationship rhythms and learning from it and seeing ourselves and Maris and I were invited, we were very honored, invited part of a group to go to Uganda and to open a new school, which had been, money had been raised by a whole group of cohorts, and we were there representing everybody. It was a beautiful experience. African children, 3 to 6, wow, was phenomenally powerful.
Don't gloss over that yet. So I want to be in that moment for a minute, and here's why. So the relationship rhythms came to life on this trip. I mean, all day, every day, in many different ways, right? Many different ways. And so as we talk this through, one of the things that was really remarkable about the experience at the school is that we had 3 years before worked with the global leadership cohort in a commitment to want to bring leadership forward to young people and to be able to do it in a way that offers them, because here's the thing, if we aren't treating young people how to respect themselves first, they don't, and I didn't hear that growing up in particular. I heard respect others, be kind to others, and I was in a very close family, and so it's not that it wasn't all there, but I don't recall ever hearing be kind to yourself, respect yourself. And these are things, this whole idea of this culture and each of these is that we get to work with our young people to really ground them in it so that we're really shifting the generations that are coming after us, right? Very important. So in this experience at the school, that was one of the things that we were committed to doing. And what was remarkable was the curiosity of these children, right? The curiosity. They came up to Ken, so Ken brought his guitar. And the touch of the guitar, the listen, the feeling as they would touch the strings. And I'm standing off to the side in tears, watching these children, 3 to 6 year olds. This whole experience was just really magical. And I think for us also very grounding, right? Because look, we have a blessed life. We have a blessed life. And that young people and these educators and the Minister of Education, as we spent time with him, we stood specifically and agreed, people who did not know each other, we united around, we have a responsibility as adults to stand in our responsibility, to protect kids, to help them feel safe and trusted. And not just for kids, but for everybody in our lives. That is our responsibility as humans. So I just wanted to touch on that because the school and their resilience and their commitment to a new relationship with us was humbling and trusting. And we don't take that lightly. And it was just beautiful. So we're grateful that that's moving forward.
We
The
could see
next
in
part of
the
our
we could see in the eyes of these 3 to 6-year-olds when they would come, they would look at us like, wow, and they were reframing. There's something else. There's another way to live. Wow, is that? So it was really interesting. So that experience, as I said, Maris eloquently talked about it in more detail, but from there we took a day and took the opportunity, everybody had a day off. We went gorilla trekking. So when we were in the impenetrable forest in Uganda and on this gorilla trek, every one of these relationship rhythms came full force. Number one, we started off and it was a trail and we were at 8,000 feet and we'd been going for a long time. But man, did you have to be present for not stepping where you shouldn't step, but that sort of thing. But then everything changed and our ranger guide said they found the gorilla family, we're going up. And that was the bushwhacking started. So we're bushwhacking and we are carrying my level of strength and agility. I hadn't been responsible for that. I hadn't trained for that. We hadn't trained. Who's responsible? Well, it's Maris's responsibility. But who's responsible for that? I was responsible. So that really came forward.
Yeah.
Came forward. And then respect. Certainly, you must respect the terrain and the magnitude of this situation. And we didn't respect it before we got there. We didn't research it, and that's respect.
Prepare for it.
We didn't prepare for it. Then reframing, we had this situation, and Maris was short of breath because of just an issue.
My condition was so bad.
So short of breath, and then what happened?
So as we're trekking, the soles of my shoes, which in the closet a month before were just fine, they both came off. So here we are at 8,000 feet. I'm short of breath. I'm barely getting. My guide is behind me, going just gently pushing, trying not to, be disrespectful. I'm drinking my water, and I'm just standing there going, "Dear God, please don't let anything puncture my foot. Please don't let me step into any hot dookie. And please be sure I don't fall on my head. Amen." And with that, the guide said, "Shh, please put on your mask to protect the gorillas from human airborne illnesses. And remember to be responsible and respectful. You're in their neighborhood." So with that, the clearing opened, and literally 10 to 15 feet from these gorillas, a family of 6, a mama, 4 children who were like any other child, climbing over each other, batting at each other, hysterical, and a father, a 900-pound silverback gorilla with the head the size of a wheelbarrow. And we were looking at this whole thing going, pinch us. This is unbelievable that they're allowing us into this space, that they're trusting. And here's the thing. It's the guides that they were trusting. We were new. The guides had created, it takes them 4 years to create a relationship, consistent relationship with these gorillas. And they trusted us in that space. And it's emotional for me because it was just the most life-changing, right? It was also one of the most difficult things we've ever done physically, grueling in that way, because you're trekking 3 hours in, up, bushwhacking, just going, okay, I'm in. And we had every intention of completing this experience. I wasn't going to stop. That was not going to happen. So our bodies were barking at us for sure.
So respect, responsibility came into play. Resilience, certainly we had to keep pushing. Maris had to keep going even though her souls were gone. For me, I was experiencing probably lack of water. Maybe I didn't bring enough water. They gave us a certain amount. I was responsible to say, hey, I need double that. In any case, resilience came up very powerfully. But then as we came into this clearing, my body just shut down. I couldn't stand. I couldn't walk. Every muscle in my body was reacting to the intensity. And so our guide saw this and saw that Maris's situation and my situation. He said, I think we need to call the African rescue helicopter because the out is going to be just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the in. And so this was tough. So this was me saying, wait a minute. I know I'm probably the oldest one here, and I feel sort of proud that I can do this, and ... my ego.
And you did great, by the way.
And my
amazing.
ego.
Yeah.
But we talked about it. We looked at it from a new perspective and said, hey, one good perspective is we probably get out of here with our health intact. And that's a good perspective. So we said, okay, to our ranger guide, call the rescue helicopter. So we waited a little while. We were there.
We're looking up.
We're looking up.
Waiting to see it.
And very surprised, nothing arrived. There was nothing in the air. It was 30 guys coming through the jungle carrying 2 poles with a seat on the back that they were going to carry us out on their shoulders. This was the African rescue helicopter. So, I mean, we got carried out like kings and queens.
But the bushwhacking, I have to say that the bushwhacking on the way out was almost as harrowing because they still had to bushwhack to get out, and it was all down, right? So it was very slippery. Typically, it rains there consistently. We had no rain that day, which was amazing. That being said, it was very slippery. And so there were points that Ken and I initially tried to close my eyes because I thought, okay, if I just close my eyes and I'm just kind of in this, it'll be okay. And then at one point,
this is riding on the way out on these 2 poles.
And at one point, I look up and I went, because there was a tree coming that had I not opened my eyes, I would have had a whole other issue. So, look, these things.
And the teamwork,
amazing.
Seeing
oh my gosh,
15 guys on each one of our things.
You might have had a few more than I did. Just
maybe, probably a little bit more, probably more to my side, a little heavier. But the way they communicated, there was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was a constant chatter.
This rhythm.
Changing from one shoulder to the other. One person stepping off and another one coming in as we're moving. The teamwork was amazing. We look back on that and think, okay, wow.
What a gift.
What a gift. What an amazing experience, and brought all these relationship rhythms forward for us personally. Anyway, that's our story.
What an experience and what a story. And I think there is so much truth to, again, when you're an expert in your field and when you feel like, oh man, I'm so strong. I got here. I can do this. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to, call for this help to get back. And you're so stuck in that narrative. And then you reframe it, like you said, about, let's get out with our health. I think it's also, to reframe it to say, well, if I slip on the way down because I have no reserve and I break my leg, now we have a different problem. And now the rescue will be more difficult, not only for us, but for whoever's coming to help us. Yeah. And so it's so important to have done it the way you did it. I hope someone hears the story. And then if, because we know life's going to bring us challenges, no matter how well we prepare for them, when their challenge comes up, they can say, okay, I'm not going to bring my ego into this situation. I'm just going to solve this problem. What's the best way to do that? That is such a beautiful story to share and an example that I hope people can follow. I'm on the ski patrol during the winter, and I can tell you I relate to that rhythm. When you are going through rescues and assisting people, having that rhythm is so key, and that teamwork and being able to relate to one another in an effective way. Again, it cycles back to the framework that you are teaching is so important, because when we relate well as people, the sky's the limit as to what we can achieve as teams and as individuals. So that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and for being here and sharing everything that you have with our audience today. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity and your perspective, because I think coming at it from a medical and an emotional side, and just in the end, relations, right? Relations and how we relate are an inside out job. And so we really honor that you in your field choose that every day, because bedside manners with doctors who are really busy, that's not always easy. It's not always assumed. And that you're carrying this work into your office and family and out to the world is really important. So we honor you for that. Thank you for that and bringing us into your circle.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that more medical schools and residency programs will use training programs and services and coaches like yourselves to teach this. Because like you said, it's 85% of what people are experiencing when they experience your expertise is how you relate to them. And unfortunately, historically, there hasn't been a lot of education on that. And just like you said in your story, when you see how these little kids, they're little sponges, they want to learn these skills about relating to one another and to the world. When you see it on their face, you realize people are hungry for these skills. So thank you so much again for the work that you do and for being here. And thank you so much to our audience for listening as well. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them, and I will have all the information in the show notes. I do want to ask Ken and Maris, how can people connect with you if they do want to work with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
I think probably the best way, and there's all sorts of options there on our website, just go to segalleadershipglobal.com. segalleadershipglobal.com. And there's all sorts of opportunities there. And we'll pass on some other things that you can put in the show notes.
Excellent. And we will have everything, as Ken said, in the show notes. And definitely go check out that TED Talk because it's an amazing accompaniment to everything we've learned here today. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.